Hello, CBSN. Hello, Facebook Live. I think this is a real treat. Why? Because a week ago today, the author of this book was on CBS This Morning. And what happens so many times when we have a great book, there's never enough time to discuss. So I said to, what is your name, ma'am?
Alyssa Mastromonaco.
And you are the author of?
Who thought this was a good idea?
And what's the tagline after that?
And other questions you should have answers to when you work in the White House.
And the reason why she's here is because she was at the White House for many, many years. And I thought, Alyssa, congratulations.
Thank you.
Because now, so long story short, I said, please come back when we have more time to talk, and today's that day. But since we saw you a week ago today, you are now a best-selling author. Thank you very much.
I am, thank you.
Are you keeping track?
I'm trying, but I can't be too crazy about it.
No, but congratulations. I said to you when you were here last week, number one, I thought it was so candid and so honest. For instance, highlights, you got a tampon machine in the White House, in the girls' bathroom. You had irritable bowel syndrome at the Vatican.
Yes, I did.
At the worst possible time. And you did all that, and you were still a badass and very good at your job.
Tried to be.
So let's start with this, because you start off by saying, when you first met Barack Obama, you weren't sure that he liked you. Why?
Well, I was pretty sure that he didn't like me. Yeah. He is not emotive. And so when I met with him, he just sort of had his feet kicked up and he was laid back. And he said, we had a nice conversation, but at the end he said, okay, we'll be in touch.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was the kiss
never
off.
a good sign.
No,
Somebody
I thought
says,
it was
don't
the
call
kiss
us,
off.
we'll call you. Yeah.
But then it turned out that with some finessing from Pete Rouse and Robert Gibbs, he was like, all right, we'll give her a shot. And so right before Christmas, I got a voicemail message from him that said, Alyssa, it's Barack. Let's do this. So we did it.
Okay.
I said, okay, thank you.
And what a ride it's been for you, Alyssa, because from the time you were a little kid, I always thought you were a different kind of little girl in terms of your interest, and you knew that you liked politics at a very young age. You knew this.
I did. Well, I led my nursery school class in a secret mission, which I got in trouble for. But yeah, even in high school and everything, I like leadership. I like bringing people together. Yeah. I think that's my thing. I look at leadership as very different than most people. Well, not necessarily very different than most people, but I think that leadership is getting all of the best people together and producing the best product, not just telling people what to do.
Yeah.
Because what do you get if you do that?
No, and your claim to fame, too, at one point you jumped on Bernie Sanders' hood of his car.
I jumped on Newt Gingrich's car.
Oh, while he was driving.
While he was driving. He was in Vermont trying to sell the contract with America. And we said no.
And you did that why?
Because Burlington was a very activist campus, and because the contract with America was going to be really bad for people. And even I knew that at 18.
But this is what I like. From the time in high school, you were involved in politics, even in high school.
I was.
I want people to get the background of Alyssa Mastromonaco.
Yes, I almost got impeached in high school.
Because?
Because one of my classmates thought that I had an unsavory prom date. Yes. And she thought I wasn't fit to lead the class. And so I had to actually stand in front of them and defend why it was fine.
See, now you have a little sense of Alyssa Mastromonaco. Fast forward to, here she is in the White House. And you point out in the book that you're in the physical office, the Deputy Chief of Staff. In that office, George Stephanopoulos is sat, Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod, David Plouffe, and now you.
Now me.
So when you walk in that office, do you have a moment for yourself to go, I'm here?
I did.
What was that like?
So one of the interesting things is the furniture in the West Wing is quite heavy and large, so it really doesn't move much. And I think the desk that was in there had been there for all of my predecessors, and the desk was too high for me. So when I sat in my chair, my feet dangled, and we had to get one of those. So I sat there with my feet dangling, and I was like, oh my God. And I was so overwhelmed that this was the place where all of these other people had sat, and that I was the first woman, that I felt really strongly that I need to femme it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I got this red velvet couch, and I put all of my pictures up on the walls. And one of the greatest moments was when I'm a huge fan of the Grateful Dead. And Mickey,
the Grateful
Dead, I love the Dead. And once Mickey Hart and Bob Weir walked into my office and couldn't believe that their picture was up on my wall in the West Wing, and I was like, no, I can't believe you're in my office. Never mind. So yeah, it was very special.
Did you ever feel intimidated when you were your early days of the White House? You admit you weren't quite sure what you were doing. You had an idea.
Sure, yeah.
But did you ever feel I don't belong here, or this is tougher than I thought?
No, I think the thing that made it so wonderful for us is that we were such a team on the campaign, and it was roughly the same group of people. So there was an established trust. and we all sort of knew what we were good at. And so when I say that I was nervous about, that I wasn't going to, that this was sort of like out of my depth, I don't think there was one person who didn't think they were out of their depth. I just talked about it a lot.
But you all protected each other, though. That's
Yes,
what
we
stood out
did.
to me in this
We
book.
did.
That everybody seemed to have each other's back.
Especially among the original crew, like Valerie Jarrett and Dan Pfeiffer and Jon Favreau, all of us, we knew it was hard. And I think the one thing that aligned us the most is that we were all there for Barack Obama. No one was trying to get rich or famous or amass power. We all just wanted him to be the best president that he could be, because everything that he stood for was going to, we thought, be really wonderful for the country. So that was, we were there for him. We were staff.
Yeah, from the moment he was elected, of course, it made history. And I think that comes with a lot of responsibility, a lot of challenges.
It does.
But you said that you learned a lot about leadership from President Barack Obama.
Yes.
Like what?
So one of the things that I think is, people talk about him being like aloof. That could not be further from the truth. He is the most thoughtful, considered, intellectually curious person. He expected that from us. So asking questions was not frowned upon. It wasn't like, oh, Alyssa doesn't know what, quantitative easing is. He liked that we asked questions.
What is quantitative easing?
I mean, I could have told you a while ago. It's something that's good for the markets. It's terrible. But he knew that we were all sort of finding our way, and he helped us find his way, and we helped him a bit. And when it came to leadership, just because I was younger than some of the people at the table, he wasn't like, oh, Alyssa, No, he was like, wait, stop, Alyssa's talking. And so that's something that I think I've always tried to take away.
No, you also said that, when you're in a meeting, that Barack Obama wants to hear all different points of view.
He does.
Regardless of whatever the position is. And then he seeks his own counsel.
Yes. And one of the things, so whether it was, the economic crisis or healthcare, lots of times we'd all be sitting around the Roosevelt Room table, and he was famous for the go-around, where after we would have had a discussion, he would go around the table and we'd all have to say go, no go, or yes or no. And sometimes when it was really, when I was included in the meeting, so I had situational awareness, so I knew what was happening, but I wasn't really in a place where I had a strong opinion, I would just say pass. And he would, and so once he's like, why do you say pass? I'm like, because I'm not giving you a recommendation on this because I don't know enough. And he was like, good for you.
The name of the book is, do you mind if I mention the book?
Go ahead, please mention the book.
Who thought this was a good idea? The author is Alyssa Mastromonaco. And let's start with the title, Alyssa, because I love the story behind the title. Who thought this was a good idea means what?
So who thought this was a good idea is something that during the first campaign, we would obviously have to make a lot of decisions for Obama. He was not a micromanager, and so we would plan days and days of campaign travel, and every couple of days or weeks, you would get an email when you went a little bit outside the box or did something that was like, he doesn't like the cold, so maybe it was out in the cold. You would get an email that said, hey, who thought this was a good idea? He knew full well that I thought it was a good idea, but didn't care. And so I would write back, I did. Yeah. And then he would write back, okay.
You tell a great story about he was campaigning in the pouring rain.
It was awful. He was campaigning. It was in Pennsylvania. It was Pennsylvania about a week and a half before the election, and it was Chester, Pennsylvania, and it was cold, and we woke up that morning in Chicago and saw it was snowing, and we're like, oh no. Snow, and it was an outdoor event.
You could have called it off, but you didn't.
We could have, but John McCain was canceling all of his events, and we said, this is our moment. We're going to look strong and young and virile. And so I went into David Plouffe. I gave him the forecast. I said, I think we should still do it, and he said yes. And so we sent a note to the road, and we said, hey, guys, you're going to keep this event in Chester. And Reggie Love wrote back and said...
Who was the president's body man?
He was the president's body man, and he said, who thinks this is a good idea? And I said, we do, Reg. And then as we all watched the event unfold on television.
In the pouring rain.
It was snow. And then it became sleet, and it slapped him in the face. And he finished the event, and as he was walking off stage, he put his hand out, and I saw Reggie put the phone in his hand.
And you could see that.
I could see it
on TV.
because he literally stopped speaking and went like this. And so then my phone rang 10 seconds later, and it was him, and he said, Alyssa, it's Obama. I said, sir, what a great event. You're so awesome. You killed it. And he said, where are you? I said, I'm at my desk. He said, must be nice, and he hung up on me. And that was it. But the punchline is that the photo of him being slapped in the face with sleet won the Pulitzer, and we laughed about it for years after that.
But Alyssa, I sat there when I laughed out loud, number one, when I read, and I thought, how you must have felt when you just hear the click. Must be nice, click.
Oh, I was actually glad the conversation was over. I was like, we're going to move on after this. It'll be fine.
You also learned, you know, he's also, I think, very candid, and he calls a spade, and when he's upset, you know it.
Yes.
But there was a line, I thought it was so interesting, that at one point the President of the United States says to you, words matter.
Yes.
Because of an email that you had sent, you had gotten a little tiff with somebody.
Little tiff.
Which I could see that, you know, you're angry and you start typing it out right away.
Yes, and you also think your colleagues aren't going to narc on you.
Yes, but somebody did.
I think a couple people did. And the funniest thing is it was an article that sort of, someone had spoken out of school. We were getting a new chief of staff. And it was the New York Times, I think, and they said, Alyssa Mastromonaco, who largely handles logistics, is expected to remain. So like everything about that sentence pissed me off.
Yeah.
And so I replied all to the email that had sent it, and I was like, this is despicable. Who are we? We should have each other's backs, even though we usually did. And then my good friend Kathy Rumler.
Why did that piss you off, though?
Because I felt it was really diminishing to the breadth of what I did, and that nobody would have said that about the economic advisor or the deputy chief before me, who was a man. And so I replied all, and I was a little sassy. And then my friend Kathy Rumler, who was the president's lawyer, doubled down on my behalf. We're both sassy. And then the next morning, I got a note from the Oval and said, come down and see POTUS. And because you're not, like there are people you work for and you get a note, you're like, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, whatever. And so I went down. And he comes and sits down, and he gave me the face, and he sits on the couch. And
What's the face?
The face is, it's like, come on now.
Yeah.
And so instead of, normally if it was a quick thing, he'd sit behind his desk and you just go over to the desk, do your business. But we sat on the couch, and I was like, oh no, it's therapy. It's therapy. And so he said, you know, I know about this article and people are really upset by your response. And I just went silent and I started staring, and he's like, stop trying to figure out who told me. And I was like, you know me. And so he said, your words matter. You can't do things like that. He's like, everyone was very, you know, upset that you were so upset. And I said, well, why didn't they just come tell me?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, Alyssa, just, you know.
Yeah, but I think that's quite a lesson, though, from the President of the United States.
And after that, it changed how I emailed. It really did, because even if I'm really upset now, I just go find the person and I say something, because email is, it can be. Or
Alyssa, don't put it in writing.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, now I don't. No. Wait till those archives come out.
Yes, don't put it in writing. I also thought that one of the reasons, because I want to get the quote, you wrote this book, was you wanted to get more women interested and excited about government.
Yes. Because I think that politics can be very off-putting. You see more men run than women, and you see more men in government than women, and people go to where they see themselves in leadership.
Yeah.
And so I wanted younger women especially to know that I wasn't perfect. I was a hot mess. That didn't mean I wasn't smart, didn't mean I wasn't good at my job, and didn't mean I didn't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, you don't have to be in the perfectly like navy pinstripe suit with your hair pulled back in a bun to be in government, which is what I saw when I was an intern.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit off-putting to me.
But that's why I think this was so important. You said it's okay to admit you make mistakes. It's okay to admit that you can be silly.
Yes, and one of the things that I learned, and this was after the White House, but one of the people in my life that I actually fired was not for making a mistake. It was for lying about it. If you I made mistakes, you have to go in. You have to say, I messed up. I'm sorry. And then you move on and you learn from it. But, you know, covering it up doesn't get anybody anywhere.
No, you also said that when you make a mistake, own up to it.
Yes.
Don't wuss out. Your words, don't wuss out.
Don't wuss out.
Don't wuss out.
There were times I made mistakes, and the times when I would go into to POTUS and POTUS Obama, and I said, look, you know, this didn't turn out great. I'm really sorry. And he's like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Happens to everybody. He's
He
like,
was okay as long as you admitted
as long
it.
as you said that you were sorry.
And it's what you said, working in the White House can be exhausting and demanding, but also exhilarating.
Yes. There is no, you never, and this is like a very sort of shallow example.
Well, you're part of a very small club.
Yes,
But go ahead.
but when you are walking on and off Marine One and Air Force One, especially when you're in a foreign country, you realize what that means. Like, you're representing the government and the people, and there's nothing more exhilarating than that, especially when you're really trying to do your level best to do right by them. And yeah, but it is exhausting.
You also said, though, when you left the White House, you for the first time had anxiety and depression.
I did.
When you
Well,
left.
it was like an identity crisis. You know, when you think about it, my whole sort of maturing life, like my whole adult life, I was with Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And I knew.
How old were you when you started with him?
I was like 28.
28.
And I left when I was 38.
Uh-huh.
And everything I had grown and done, I had really done with him. And so when I left, it's like all of a sudden, no one's calling
Who am
you.
I?
No, you think when you leave the next day that your phone's going to be blowing up, that everyone's going to be like, oh my God, Alyssa left. What are we going to do? And then no one calls you.
Alyssa, come work for us.
Yes, no one calls you, and you just sit at the kitchen counter in your pajamas, like taking a shower before your husband comes home, so he thinks you did something all day.
Yeah.
And, you know, you start cooking dinner at 4, so you can have a glass of wine, and it's okay.
Yeah.
But no, and I did that for a while before I started getting, sort of getting back in the game and getting my head in the game. But no, I developed anxiety because in the White House, the chaos, everyone's usually marching in the exact same direction.
Yeah.
So if there's less chaos and just more demand. And so I could do demand, but when things swirled and I felt like I was sort of running around with a butterfly net trying to catch everything, I didn't manage it very well. And the fact that I couldn't manage it, I was like, what's wrong with me? Who have I become? I made it through, 6 years in the White House, like a
And I did
baller.
okay, yeah.
And now I'm here unemployed and I can't keep it together.
So
and
I
it
go
was
from
very
a baller
hard.
to what? Yeah.
Kind of like a wreck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a bit of a wreck.
And did you question your own value? Like, where's your place in the planet?
Yes.
Where
Oh,
is-
100%.
Yeah.
It was the hardest part, and it's why I wanted to leave Washington, because when you stay in Washington and you've been in the White House and then you're not anymore, you go anywhere for dinner and the only question people ask you is, when's the last time you saw Obama? And it's like, he's working. Like, we're not having cocktails.
Do they flip their hair back
They
like
do,
that,
because
too?
everybody knows the answer. And so you're like, no, I mean, he's been in Asia. Like, I haven't seen him. So it was very hard, and I was glad to come up here to New York.
No, you say all about elections, that it's all about power. And
Yes.
it's all about you're the shit at the time. This is a quote in the book.
Yes.
You're the hot shit at the time.
Yes.
But after that, there's always a hotter shit around the corner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is why, even when Secretary Clinton started her campaign, I was really glad to be in the private sector, because what I never wanted to be was one of those people who was just like reaching back to their glory days and trying to be who they
say,
were.
remember when I
Right.
used to do.
And
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is that the time I had with Barack Obama from the very beginning to Deputy Chief of Staff, I don't think that anything will ever come close to that. And
Yeah.
so why try to a certain, to a certain degree.
And you're doing what now?
So now I'm the president of Global Communication Strategy and Talent at A&E Networks.
And you feel about that what?
It's great. I love working with the history.
You have Nancy Dubuque.
Yes, with Nancy
Who's
is
awesome,
Nancy
yeah.
is a baller.
Yeah.
And we work with Lifetime, which is great because I really think that women need a place to go. And I think the history property is wonderful because it's time for a destination where people go and they know that it's the truth and that everything's been fact checked 7 ways to Sunday. But it was very hard after Secretary Clinton lost.
Yes.
To not be in a place where I could be an unfettered activist. And I do sort of have to calibrate a little bit, not say anything too insane on Twitter or, but I've tried to find ways to channel my energy to sort of make an impact.
And what is it like for you now to watch the current administration say what they say about the Obama administration, that you all had wiretapped Trump Tower, that he's a bad, sick guy? I'm sure you don't look at it favorably. I get that. But what do you really feel when you hear these types of allegations?
I feel really wounded and sad because, first of all, that is not who Barack Obama is. But just in the transfer of power and transition between administrations, the Bush administration couldn't have been more gracious, more helpful, more thorough in our transition. And I know that the Obama administration was the same exact way for the Trumps. And so I don't know how they could sit there in good faith and just tweet that Barack Obama wiretapped. I mean, just things that have no base in fact. And the other thing that I have a hard time watching is just how they treat the White House. Camp David is a place that has been revered for years. Leaders, foreign leaders, there is no greater invitation than to go to Camp David. And he's basically turned Mar-a-Lago into Camp David, even though there is this completely staffed, funded place not far from the White House.
But he has a right to do that, doesn't he?
Well, he does.
He
But
does.
As someone who criticized Barack Obama for driving down the street to play golf at Andrews Air Force Base, flying the entire White House down to Florida every weekend is, I would say, arguably more expensive. And also just, that photo that everybody talked about with Kellyanne Conway on the couch. And
in the Oval Office
in the Oval Office, and she was tucked under, and she was blackberrying, and there were all of these presidents of the HBCUs in there.
Historically Negro Black colleges.
Yes, and I couldn't believe, what offended me about that photo is that the Oval Office is one of the most sacred places, and to have a group that you're hosting and you're not even paying attention and you're sitting on the couch and not engaging them, it's like, it's nothing that ever would have happened.
Yeah, it was presidents of historically black colleges
Yes.
who were there. She has talked about that. She says she was at a different angle to take a picture. That is her explanation.
Yes.
Do you miss it, Alyssa?
Oh, of course.
You do.
How can you not? It's the most special experience and unique experience, and I'm one of a handful of people who have ever had it.
And you close the book with, politics will always be a twinkle in your eye.
Absolutely.
Makes me think that maybe you'll get back into politics.
I don't know, Gayle, are you going to get into politics?
No, ma'am. Better question, are you going to get into
You
politics?
never know.
Yeah.
I think the reason I've always been successful is because I worked for people I deeply believed in, not because I just wanted to be close to power. So if someone came along that I thought would make the country better, you never know.
Well, I have to say this. I love the book because I think it was so you, number one.
Thank you.
It was so entertaining. I think there's a lot of life lessons learned. And you say this, that you can be a cupcake-eating cheerleader and a serious businesswoman at the same time.
Absolutely.
I know that's true. I know that's true. Bravo and congratulations.
Thank you, Gayle.
Goodbye, CBSN and Facebook. Her name is Alyssa Mastromonaco. She is a best-selling author, but that doesn't mean you can't buy the book. There's still more to sell. Bye.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.